welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Kingman City Council on today, Tuesday, July 5th of the year 2022. We'd first like to turn some time over to our city clerk for roll call.
Mayor Miles.
Here.
Vice Mayor Watkins.
Here.
Councilmember Mello is excused this evening. Councilmember Nelson.
I am here.
Councilmember Samley. Here. Councilmember Scott Staley.
Present.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I would like to ask everybody to stand for the invocation which will be given to us by Pastor Bob Pete of the Kingman of God Church, after which we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's go before the Lord in prayer. Dear God, our Heavenly Father, we invite you to preside over this meeting this evening. Even if we have differing opinions, we ask that you would give us a unity of spirit. Help us to each listen politely as others share their points of view. Help us to work as a unified team in combining ideas for a great outcome. Help us to work as a whole rather than as individuals trying to promote their own agendas. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together for a shared outcome that glorifies you and does your will. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Councilor Samley, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The council may go into executive session for legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38-431.03. 3, to discuss any agenda item. The following items may be discussed, considered, and decisions made relating thereto. First on our agenda, item number 1, appointments. Transit Advisory Commission appointment. The Transit Advisory Commission currently has 4 vacancies. The commission has received an application from Dr. Tremaine Rasa. I hope I am saying that right. Dr. Rasa is the Mojave Community College Vice President of Student and Community Engagement, a registered voter, and is a city resident. Staff recommends appointment of Dr. Rasa for a term ending on December 31st, 2024. Is Dr. Rasa here today?
Dr. Rasa could not be with us this evening, but we do have Transit Superintendent Sherry Furr on via Zoom. If you have any questions for her, she's happy to answer those for you.
Okay. Council, do we have any questions for Sherry? Okay, hearing none. I am assigned to that commission, so I would make the motion that we accept the appointment of Dr. Rasa to the Transit Advisory Commission appointment, which will expire December 31st, 2024. All in favor say aye. Oh, hold
I'll
on.
second that.
So we have a second. Thank you. We have a second.
There's a second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries. Item number 2 on our agenda, call to the public, comments from the public. Those wishing to address the council should fill out requests forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda, with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Clerk Meredith.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We did not receive any requests to join via Zoom this evening, and no written comments were received in advance. We do have one member in our audience that has signed up to address the council this evening.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Willow Cronky, if you'd like to come forward. And be sure to speak up loud and into the mic. Thank you.
How's this? Good? My name is Willow. My last name is pronounced Cronky. I have a soon-to-be 10-year-old daughter, and please remember that age. It will be important in a moment. It's my job to teach her to consider her responsibilities, consequences of her decisions, and her part in our community. These are the reasons that I'm here having this conversation with you. First, Arizona, much like the rest of our society, has a long-standing history of violating basic human rights in the name of morality. Segregation was upheld as a righteous Arizonan law for 43 years. Arizona Code 302 Indian Reform School legalized the kidnapping and indoctrination of indigenous children. It is still on our law books. Arizona legalized forced sterilization in 1929 of mentally ill or mentally defective citizens, and it took until 1980 for Arizona to acknowledge their failure to moral obligations. In your positions of influence and responsibility, how do you plan to prevent this pattern from continuing? Second, both the state and federal constitution outline responsibilities to govern and organize communities. This includes distributing wealth and resources to community services. It is within this council's power and jurisdiction to deprioritize investigating abortions. This proposed policy would include measures such as barring the funding of investigation or information collection, would include measures such as, information collection, and directing the city manager to work with Kingman police to make investigating abortions their lowest priority. Examples of this course of action can be seen in cities all around our country, such as El Paso, Texas, Austin City, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Dayton City, Ohio. Third and lastly, in every official document I could find, the command to uphold the Arizona Constitution and the rights declared within was loud and clear. This includes the right of petition and assembly that shall never be abridged. How do you plan to protect your citizens from harm that are speaking for their rights and demanding to be heard, like 13-year-old Lily in Lakefield, Florida, that was detained simply for using a bullhorn? The second is liberty of conscience. You took an oath to be impartial in your office and in your responsibilities. How do you plan to protect our inalienable rights, even when they do not align with your personal choices, such as ensuring a safe and legal abortion for a 10-year-old child, such as was denied in Ohio? We have seen the consequences of staying silent in the face of injustice. We implore you, rather than continuing this despicable history, learn from the mistakes of our state and our country to build a better future where human rights are the guaranteed commonality of all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Crumpy. That is all we have for call to the public tonight. So moving on to item number 3. On the consent agenda. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. I hope all of you have had a chance to take a look at the consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be pulled so that we can discuss them?
Vice Mayor, I'd like to pull item F.
Item F. Okay. Councilor Samley or Councilor Staley? Okay. Councilor Nelson or Mayor?
No, thank you.
Okay, I would like to pull item D for discussion. So can we have a motion then for approving consent agenda items A through C, item E, and item G?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item D, I'd like to turn some time over to the city attorney for clarification on this matter.
Yes, Vice Mayor. This is Resolution 5422. It's regarding board and commission appointments. And this kind of goes back to when council directed staff to update our board and commission list. On my exhibit list, I didn't update one name, so I just need to switch out a name under the Municipal Utility Commission listing. I have Aileen Parker there. She is not currently on the board or on that commission anymore. It's being substituted for Randy Dimmitt, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, with the proposed expiration date of 12/31/24.
Okay. I think that can be done by just as we
Yeah,
are today, just with that
just
mentioned.
approve that if that's your choice.
Okay. All those in favor then of moving on item?
Need a motion.
Oh, yes, can we have a motion first? I'm sorry.
So moved.
Is it-
Oh.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye on item consent agenda 3D.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, a motion carries. Counselor Walker.
On item F, I would just like to see if somebody at staff could give us a rundown of the project. I've had a lot of calls on this, wanting to know where we're at, what's going on. I just figured it'd be a good update for the residents to hear from staff.
Yeah, so Phil's going to talk to it since he's ultimately responsible for the project, and we're definitely prepared to talk about it.
We will hear from our city engineer, Mr. Allred.
So we are near the tail end of design. We're making one small change for the traffic signal there that's going to be at the new road. So moving forward, now that we're in the new fiscal year, we're working with WACOG to get the money allocated to us. We'll finalize the plans, and we hope to get it out to bid. There's one thing that we're going through right now. We need to get some right-of-way, and we're going through the eminent domain process for that. Those papers have been filed. We hope to get immediate possession. Once we get immediate possession of the property, then we can, and once the funds are in place from WACOG, we can put the project out for bid.
Okay, you think that'll be this year, fourth quarter? We're already in third quarter.
It's going to depend on the court.
Okay.
I would say I would hope to have it out to bid before the end of this year.
Okay, that's
But
all I had.
yeah.
Just kind of want an update on it. Thank you.
Yep.
When actually, Phil, will we see, before you put that out to bid, will we see what that plan is going to be? Will you bring that to council so we can see what that looks like?
Plan's already available.
Is it available?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I want to bring to my light then more too. So
Yeah,
that's good.
good.
Yeah, we had it at the expo, but
Yes.
we can certainly provide whatever information.
Thanks for the reminder. Okay, thank you.
I would make a motion to approve item F.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of item F on our consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. We have no old business. Moving on to actually, in between old business and new business, the city attorney has requested that we go into executive session for just a short break. And so I would like to make a motion that we go into executive session. Can we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion, and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And
Okay,
ca-
we will, yes.
And I was
ma'am.
just saying, could I just note that executive session, just provide legal advice regarding resolution 5423?
Okay, so about the discussion of the new
Correct.
business.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will be excused for a little bit, and all of you are welcome to stay here, but if you would like to leave to whatever you'd like to do. They didn't have to, but they did. Okay, we are back from executive session. Moving on to item number 5, under new business. Item 5A, resolution number 5423, referring a proposed ordinance to increase the transaction privilege tax and use rate to the qualified electors of the City of Kingman at the November 8th, 2022 statewide election. For many years, the City Council has identified a need to dedicate a funding source for the repair, maintenance, and improvement of streets. At the May 10th, 2022 budget work session, direction was given to evaluate dedicating an increased sales tax rate to fund the street repairs, maintenance, and improvements program and evaluate the impact of adopting a big ticket option. Since the city does not have the authority to increase sales tax without voter approval, referring a sales tax increase to the city's voters at the November 8th, 2022 statewide election is being considered. Staff recommends council approve resolution number 5423. And of course, the council may go into executive session to discuss this item per ARS 38-431.03. Okay, council. Mayor Foggin.
Not mayor.
I mean Manager Foggin.
No.
Starts with an M.
Yeah, it does. No, no, thank you.
Chicken.
Yeah. The pay just isn't quite up to snuff. We do have a couple of reports that we want to walk you through. The first is based on our budget workshop. We had discussed funding proposals for a street maintenance, repair, and improvement program. And in those discussions, there was a question asked by Councilor Walker if we could look at what the value would be of bringing some of the maintenance in-house. Is there a cost savings? What is that cost savings? So Jack Plante, Rob Owen, Tina Moline, and myself and me have been meeting and working through some analysis. Of course, Jack has done just an absolutely fantastic job of crunching numbers, working with Tina to make sure those numbers are correct. And so we have a report to kind of show you where the possible cost savings comes from, what that looks like. And so in an effort for the council to understand that we've done this homework and it was the right thing to do, Jack Plante's got a presentation that will then be followed after he's answered all the questions that you may have regarding that work. Then Tina has a presentation on what the increased tax rate looks like based on our cost savings that we're going to show you from Jack's presentation. So we'll just move from there. Mr. Plante.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Uh-oh. How about now? A little better? Give me 1 second. Or we might need Annie's help. Oh. I was about to shut it off. All right. Well, thank you for having me back. As Mr. Foggin indicated, we're going to talk about street repair, maintenance, and improvements. And we got a couple slides to roll through here that you've seen before. The first one is, like Mr. Foggin's safety minutes. We're always going to talk about right treatment, right road, right time. We run about 4.5 million square yards of asphalt. That's actually about 450 lane miles of pavement, so we could actually pave a road from here to Albuquerque, New Mexico with what we have just in the city limits. So that's why we take such a high priority on trying to select the right treatment. So you've seen this before. This is our decision tree. I just want to talk about this for a few minutes briefly. As we go through the next slides, you'll see similar treatments have been combined. So when you're looking at numbers, all the paving is combined. I've got different thicknesses and different paving treatments, But when we talk about paving, we're going to talk about paving as a whole. Just I want to identify that as we go forward. And I also wanted to point out, sorry I got ahead of myself. A couple of my slides changed in order. So what you see up here, I may have a little bit different than what you have. It's the same slide, I didn't like the order they were in, so I apologize. So one of the important things here is as you go through, and this will really become evident as we go through the slides, the lower the PCI, the heavier the treatment and the more expensive it is. And so as we go through, we'll show that to you. What I would like to point out is we have lowered this treatment list down as low as we can get for a number of reasons. One, trying to be able to afford the program. The lower PCI treatments are costly, and so we try to avoid those while still getting a good value and good return on those treatments on our roads. So, like I say, as we move on, you'll see that more and more. So this is one of them that moved around a little bit. You guys have seen this before. You've seen the map. This is just a pie chart of the same thing. Actually been some improvement to it. Just, again, some of that is due to new roads coming into play, new development. So we're right now almost a 50-50 split between roads that are in good or very good versus poor and very poor condition. As you can see, 48% in poor, 7% in very poor condition. So those are on the lower end of that treatment selection. And those are the ones too, one of the things that we're trying to work around is some of the ADA requirements that come along with them through the Department of Justice. So we're trying to get the best values we can at an affordable, price range that we can do and still take into account some of the other things that are indirect costs. They can become direct depending on how that is approached. So we looked at a whole bunch of different scenarios. We're actually working with a consultant as well, so they'd helped us break down and try and run different scenarios, be it budget or be it a target base. So we selected a target base scenario. The target we chose was to try and increase our PCI to a specific target range. So what you're looking at here is on the starting PCI, that's actually where each one of those functional classes are now. And just so when you look at other, when you're wondering what other is, we got some miscellaneous stuff like paved alleys and things like that that still require maintenance, roadway related, but that's what those are. So if you're wondering what other is that PCI, each one of those lines is the reflective PCI of where we're starting and then where we want to get to. If you look, year 7 was the target that we were trying to cap to. So the goal behind that, we've made our focus arterial and collector only. And so the desire for everybody is to try and get into the neighborhoods. And so I took the starting PCI, and over year 7, I made that the target that we want to achieve. And that's to try and be as aggressive as we can, as early as we can, and get into the residential areas and still maintain our arterial collectors. What you will see between arterial collector and residential areas is a different PCI cap. We talked about that a little bit last time. So we have an 80 cap on arterial collector. So that means when we get to 80, we won't do nothing until we hit that 80 mark again, which would bring us back into preventative maintenance level. So we'll just maintain that preventative maintenance requirement from there on out. Residentials, which is actually pretty typical, you see this in a lot of agencies because of the volume. Again, we have 75% of our network is residential roads. So they put a little lower PCI value on them. And that lowers the cost, the types of treatments and things you're going to do to make your program more affordable. For us, I tried to run that to where they all would cap out at 80, and the cost goes up significantly because of that. So, like I say, we ran a whole bunch of different scenarios, and this is the one that came that would be the most likely to be achievable financially. Another thing I'd like to point out is, and this is just something to look at for now. We got other conversations to have regarding the out years, 8, 9, and 10. So you can see we're pretty aggressive. Year 1, it starts slow, and that's getting everything geared up and ready, and then the program starts running, and years 2 through 7 is really aggressive. And then year 8, 9, and 10, you can look at those numbers drop pretty significantly. That's where we're going into our preventative maintenance. We've made a big improvement in our system. Not to say that target couldn't change. Maybe we get to the end of cycle 1 And the council's direction is, hey, you know what, we want to try and achieve that 80 in the neighborhoods. Not saying we have to go there. Where we're at is a really reasonable PCI. But what that would do, or what that shows, is how much it costs to rehabilitate asphalt versus maintain it. And we get into some slides coming up that really shows up well. So 7-year average, I did not proofread apparently, so it's more than $12,000. I apologize that that's in there. It's actually going to be around 12 million. The overall program total, keep in mind this is not with in-house work, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is $103 million. And that's over the 10-year period. Again, most of that's spent in years 1 through 7, being pretty aggressive in the neighborhoods. So you guys seen this one last time. This was just a little bit of a representation. You can see the red is on the lower PCI scale, the green is where we want to be, and the arterial collectors gets us right to the good part of good versus very good. And so again, it's not that we can't improve that. This would be a really sound, solid network. The average PCI of peer networks is in the 70s, and this would bring us up to about a 73.5 across the board, arterial collector and residential averaged. Let's move on. This is actually a really good slide. So as we were trying to break down and figure out what treatments we think would be best for long-term utilization in-house and just in general, this slide right here shows the year of the program and then how many square yards of each one of those treatments it's used. This is where I was saying things are lumped together. So paving is all paving, chip seal is all chip seal, although most of our treatment, if you look back at the decision tree, we have what's referred to as a cape seal. So we'll come in, we'll chip seal it, seal the road, and then slurry over the top of that chip seal. Gives you a nice solid road, nice smooth surface, proves rideability, has a lot of benefits. Paving, I told you paving is paving in this instance. No matter what the thickness is or what type it is, we put paving in here. So one thing that I'd like to point out is look at that blue line. Keep this in mind when we move to the next slide. So that's paving. That is the lowest quantity used. That's the type of treatment that's going to be used on our lowest PCI value roads, right? So keep that in mind as we move forward. Just hold down to that for me for a minute. If you look in here, we evaluated chip seal versus slurry, and when we get to those out years where we've been real aggressive and our PCI continues to improve, we talked about last meeting that the use of chip seal would decrease based on the current decision tree. And you can see that in the gray and orange lines there at year 8, 9, and 10. You can see those two lines meet and they start to diverge. Chip seal's trending down while slurry continues to trend up. And that would be a heavily used treatment even moving forward for rehabilitation and maintenance. The yellow color line, that's where those preventative maintenance treatments kick in. Those are the high density mineral bonds, the fog seals, just the surface coats. Remember we talked about like a sunscreen? That's what those are. Those are the cheaper, just maintain your asphalt in a good condition. And you can see how high those increase in those out years. We'll talk about it a little bit more coming up here, but again, back to the utilization of equipment. Looked at chip seal, looked at the volume of chip seal being done versus the slurry and the long-term utilization. And we'll get into that in these next slides, but as you can see, those two start to diverge with the slurry continuing to trend up. So this right here is a breakdown. Again, this is based on contract prices, the current contract prices that we've had proposals for. And so this breaks down each one of those treatments, paving, slurry, micro, chip, and fog. So remember that blue line that had the least amount of square yards over the 10-year period? It eats up over 75% of the needed budget for what we're doing. So that really highlights how much it costs to fix those roads that are in poor and very poor condition. And right now we're about half our network. It's not the worst it could be, but that's a significant amount that is needed. And so then you can see the other treatments, chip seal and slurry. There's about $313,000 difference between those two over the 10-year period. And then ultimately the 4.75 million, 4.76 is the preventative maintenance treatments. All right, self-performed work. As I mentioned, we looked at a number of treatments, chip seal, slurry. We broke those down and were really, with a high level of scrutiny, went through all the costs. And when I say all the costs, all the operation costs, the maintenance costs, the material costs, personnel, all that. So that's how when we come up with these numbers that we give you, that's where those come from. So the top two most used, as you saw on the last slide, were slurry and micro, and then chip seal. There's about 1 million square yard difference between the two over the 10-year period. But again, as chip seal declines, our slurry will continue to incline as far as usage. Increase, sorry, yes. So talked a little bit about that cost comparison. First, we took out the anticipated volumes based on the quantities that's spit out by that target scenario. So in that 10-year period, especially those 7 years, the cost that I'm giving you is based off of those quantities. We compared that over the contract price, like I mentioned. So we have current proposals that we've got prices on for all of these different treatments, and we compared that to what we have for an in-house cost to operate the program. When I say we captured all the costs, that's the initial purchase of the equipment, again, maintenance and repair, hourly operating costs, internal services, all those things were captured and used for a price, be it per square yard, per ton, whatever the rate is for that particular application. Some are by the pound, which is crack seal. So we also looked at what was needed for support for the slurry. So you have crack seal and patching that go ahead of that, and we need to keep people busy all year round. So we broke those quantities down and looked at the amount of material that would be applied or work that would be done annually to make sure that we could keep that crew or crews busy all through the wintertime. So when you look at the cost breakdown, that's going to include patching and base repair. That's going to include our crack seal. You see them go out with the squeegees and seal the cracks. And that would be like a wintertime prep for the slurry that's coming in the summer. We broke down based on the average low temperatures and what we thought for an operating window. We may be able to extend that, depends on how the year goes, but we broke that down to make sure that we could fit the required quantities in the operation window. And again, just a quick reminder for chip seal versus slurry. These two are going to be used in conjunction a lot. Chip seal certainly has its place. The one on the left was the scrub seal we talked about last time. That's where we actually pull oil down into the cracks and then we chip seal over the top of it. It doesn't fix a lot of the imperfections in the surface versus the slurry on the right. What you'd be looking at, I talked about cape seals. We'd actually do the chip on the left and then come back at another time and then slurry over the top of that and give a real nice product inside the neighborhoods. So let's talk about the numbers. I promised you last time I'd bring you some numbers. So slurry versus micro, we broke that down. And again, initial cost for material and hauling, these numbers could get slightly better. Materials is one of the things. We did this in the past. We did a cost benefit analysis and trying to get local materials for the slurry wasn't achievable at the time. So now if we went into this and we increased the quantities, we might be able to. But either way, over the 10-year program, that saves us about 9%, which is about $1.5 million roughly on the program. And again, that's making sure we captured everything from initial setup to the operating cost, internal services. Crack seal, that's about $1.2 million saved. And then patching, base repair, that's about $201,000. That's based on them going out and doing all the patching and stuff that's required. Because if you look back at the decision tree, I didn't point that out, it'll say BR 5% or 10%. That's actually the base repair. So we know in what PCI range we're going to be able to go out and need to do this. And so that's captured in there. So we looked at the combined savings for a whole program in-house for slurry, crack seal, and patching. And it's about 9% is what we have on there right now. So it saves about $2.8 million. If we took that off of the $103 million for the 10-year target-driven approach, that's going to leave you at about $100 million for the 10-year program to complete that work. The overall reduction, when we take that 2.7 million out of the equation, 2.8 million, leaves you at about a 3% on the overall savings of the whole program, which includes a blended program, in-house and contract work. And so with that, try and answer any questions.
Thank you, Jack. Questions?
Just a quick note, Vice Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Counselor.
Seriously, our city staff does an amazing job of bringing stuff to us. Very, very clear. And I actually want to tell Jack that doing it in the 100,000s sometimes makes it a little clearer than it does in the millions, because we live in those categories. We don't live in the other numbers for most of us. So guys, thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Planty?
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Counselor.
I just wanted to make sure, we talked about districts last time. So you're still working on platting out the city into districts and moving along into districts, kind of like in a rotation pattern. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And part of that's based on what we're trying to do is break those areas out, because, you know, one district, if we just arbitrarily built a district, you know, you may have one district that has 40% of the work in it. So that's what we're trying to work out right now, and make sure that we kind of flatten the quantity required, or the dollar amount required where we can.
So you're looking at condition of roads and where you need to start first within those districts?
Correct.
And also, you're going to be working on both residential and the arterial within those districts?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so and that's actually a good point. So we'll be working on both arterial collectors and residentials. Now, arterial collectors will still kind of live on as their own animal, because those are our priority. So if it falls within the time period that we're treating that district, then we'll do them at the same time. But there may be instances where we have to go out and catch arterial collectors just to keep those ones up.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, I know Counselor Walker had asked you about, of course, trying to perform this doing in-house, and I appreciate the numbers you've crunched together. So it is a cost savings for us doing the in-work. So that means we are going to go purchase. We would purchase in the 10-year plan. We would purchase a sealer. I mean, a chip spreader and all that kind of stuff.
So not a chip box. We'd look at slurry. So
Okay.
and I guess I kind of glazed over that. If it were the direction of council and Mr. Foggin, the $100 million budget number includes us doing self-performed work. So that'd be the slurry equipment. The crack seal machine we have is old, very old, and so that includes all new capital. So that would capture the crack seal equipment, the slurry equipment, and the support needed for those.
Okay. And the only reason I mention that, of course, right now the county is chip sealing, as you well know, out a lot of the roads out in our area in the county.
Mhm.
And of course, we see their spreader box or whatever, however they're doing that now. And so,
Yeah. So if looking for a direct recommendation, based on the budgetary numbers, the decision tree, you know, the final product, the public acceptance, I would recommend the slurry.
Okay.
That works actually kind of potentially hand in hand. We have had conversations with Mojave County as far as them doing chip seal for us. They're kind of at their capacity at the moment, but talking to their public works director, Mr. Latowski, he had mentioned in the past that there is a possibility that we could have them chip seal maybe for us in the fall or something. So there's a potential for trade for them to do chip and us to do slurry. The first couple of years for us, it's going to be everything we can do to get what we need done. But looking forward, that would be a good opportunity for a partnership between us and the county.
well, and a cost savings to the citizens, and that's most important.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Jack.
Awesome. Well, thank you, guys.
Welcome, Tina, our finance director.
Thank you so much. Let me get out of Jack's and get into mine. That's all right. Annie showed me how to do this earlier, so I feel like a pro. All right, so we've talked about the program itself, and so now let's talk about the funding options for the program. Let me get here. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the program and the current funding sources that we have for the proposed program. We're going to look at our current sales tax rates, our collections for those and the uses of them, looking at the sales tax funding options for the program, and then next steps. So as Jack proposed, if we perform in-house work, we save $2.8 million, so the program would cost just over $100 million. With our current funding sources, through a transfer from the general fund for the first 7 years, and then utilizing some HERF funding, as well as our restaurant and bar sales tax, will generate about $55 million. So there's a $45 million deficiency with our current funding options. So as we look at the sales tax rate increase, it's important to look what we've done for streets and what those rates have looked like in the past. So I have a lot of history here, but we're just going to look at what we've done for the streets. So in 2012, the council adopted a 1% additional tax on restaurant and bars that would be dedicated to street repairs and maintenance. They have kept that in place, or they kept that in place until 2017, when the council adopted a 0.5% increase overall for the overall tax that would be dedicated to streets. And then we know what happened with the successful citizen initiative that repealed that tax, and so that went away. However, we do still have the 1% additional restaurant and bar tax that is dedicated to streets. And it would be remiss of me not to also state that we're here tonight as far as the voter, whether or not to take this to the voters because of that repeal. The authority for the council to increase taxes was removed. So our current tax collections and uses, so for fiscal year 23, we're expecting to collect just over $30 million in taxes. $27 million of that goes directly into the general fund and supports our general fund divisions and operations. It also is utilized to pay for capital projects. We transfer quite a few $1 million into our capital projects fund for general government. We also utilize that for our PSPRS debt service payment and to fund our Rancho Santa Fe project so that we don't have to incur as much debt for that. And in fiscal year 23, $5.5 million for our streets. We collect $1.5 million on our 4% additional hotel tax that is split evenly between our general government capital projects and tourism activities. And then in fiscal year 23, we expect to collect $1.2 million for street repairs and maintenance. So we've talked a lot about different sales tax funding options. We've looked at another additional hotel tax, additional restaurant and bar, even looked at food sales tax. But overall, the program's very expensive, and so we've looked at just an overall increase in our sales tax rates. We also, at the budget work session, talked about a big ticket option as part of that sales tax increase. So what is the big ticket option? The big ticket option is an option in the Model City Tax Code. It allows cities and towns to really adopt a tiered tax rate. And that is adopting a tiered tax rate on single items that exceed some sort of specified dollar amount. Now, it's important that you understand that this only applies to retail and use tax categories. It does not apply to construction sales tax, only the retail and use tax categories. Now, within that big ticket option, there are also a couple of different options that the council can consider. We have something called the single item, and we have something called the single item portion options. The difference between the two. We'll use an example. That's the easiest way to show this. So if a city adopted a 3% sales tax rate, or had a 3% sales tax rate, and had adopted a big ticket option where the single item purchase was taxed, the single item purchase at $10,000, anything that exceeded $10,000 was at 2.5%. We'll use that. So under the single item, if a consumer goes and purchases a vehicle for $25,000, the entire $25,000 purchase would be at 2.5%. If under the single item portion, the first $10,000 would be at the higher tax rate, the $15,000 would be at the 2.5%. So there's a couple of different options for you to consider. The most fair rate, or the most fair option, is the single item portion. It taxes people the same amount for whatever amount that they're spending, so that the people who are spending $25,000, they have to pay that higher rate in the beginning rather than having to pay the lower rate for the entire purchase. So as far as savings-wise goes, using that same example, under the single item portion example, the big ticket option, under the single item portion, the consumer would be taxed $675. Under the single item, they would be taxed $625. So we always like to look at what other cities are doing, and so there are 28 other. Can I get some water? Would you mind grabbing me a bottle of water? There are 28 other cities and towns that have adopted a big ticket option, whether that be the single item or the single item portion. Thank you so much. So, 16 of them have adopted the single item portion. The thresholds range anywhere from $500 to $35,000. 12 have adopted the other option, and those ranges are all over the place as well. And 14 impose a sales tax rate that's higher than 3%, so half of them. 22 of them collect a food tax. Of the 6 that don't, only 1 provides both police and fire services. That's the City of Phoenix, and the City of Phoenix also has a primary property tax. And 17 collect a primary property tax. And I only bring these comparisons to you just to show the range that cities adopt and the range of services that we all provide. And so although we always like to compare ourselves to other cities, and it's important to see what other cities are doing, we're all very different and have different philosophies as far as the different tax structure that we adopt. So actually funding the street repair, maintenance, and improvements program, if we wanted to make up that $45 million deficiency, we would need to adopt an increased sales tax rate of 0.52%. That would generate just over $51 million over the 10-year period. That does not take into account the big ticket option. If a big ticket option were approved, and again, I've shown many variables, but assuming that the single item portion was adopted, and let's say that $10,000 was the threshold, and you said that that amount over $10,000 would be taxed at our regular rate of 2.5%, we would need to increase that sales tax rate to 0.56% to make up the estimated revenue loss. And so with that, the next steps are to review and adopt resolution number 5423 to refer a sales tax rate increase to the voters, and should a big ticket option be included, draft the ballot language, create the publicity pamphlet. We're also required by statute to mail notices to our residential renter property owners and tenants and the TPT licensee holders as their rate is going to increase. And then the most important thing is going to be public outreach, and more public outreach through all sorts of venues. And with that, I'll take questions. Mr. Foggin and Jack will take questions.
We'll pick on all 3 of you. Okay, questions from council? Yes, Councilor.
You said in 2012, the city council at that time raised the sales tax on bar and restaurants rate just for streets. So that was 10 years ago. In that 10-year time, has the city council ever not dedicated that increase to streets?
No.
So they kept their promise.
They did.
I think that's really important to highlight. So that was my only question. Thank you.
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Councilor.
can you remind the public how much we have in the budget already earmarked for streets and for what period of time? I think that's important because we're decent for a few years, and then so we're being proactive as a council and looking past those years. So could you remind us?
So what the council has done starting in fiscal year 23 is dedicated $5.5 million from the general fund, and that is from fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 29. I think it's for the 7 years of that program. And so this particular year we're able to dedicate, so in fiscal year 23 we're actually dedicating $10 million to our streets program.
And that needs a follow-up, which is that is not sustainable past year 7. At some point, it starts cutting into our services in the general fund. So it's one of those things where it's great that we had some money to dedicate to roads and extra money. But again, I need to restate, it is not sustainable past year 7. That number will start going down because the cost of doing business in the general fund will start eating up that money, or the need for that money.
And I appreciate that, because that's exactly where I was going, is that we need to be thinking past that money that is already in the budget. So that is what we're trying to do as a council. So I had another question. Since Councilor Staley brought up the 2012, where council had put that additional monies in for street repair and maintenance, what has our population increased, and what would you say the traffic on our roads and residential development, what has that been since 2012? I realize that's kind of a loaded question, but I feel it's important to see the growth that we've had, and then also to understand the growth that we're going to incur going forward.
So I can tell you that in 2012, I want to say that the population was about 29,000 is what the census had, and we're at over 33,000 now. But I think it's also important to note that it's not just city residents that utilize our streets. I think that you can look at 2012 versus where we are today and know that travelers from out of town, we see a lot of those. And I think there's a big increase since then from just tourism.
Right. And I like that you brought that up too, because we've also had a lot of development happen outside of the city limits in the county, and we also have increased our tourism traffic in the city as well, which are utilizing our roads and would be a contributor to this tax should we agree that this would be put on forth to the voters. So
that's correct.
Just trying to get a diverse crowd of people that are contributing to the tax. So that's kind of where my mind goes, is that it's not going to all be on, although the city residents are voting on this initiative, they are not going to have the entire burden. So I want that statement out there, so, for the public.
So a few studies the city's done over the, 20 years, maybe a little less than that, has shown anywhere between, to your point, has shown that sales tax paid within the city limits of Kingman equate to anywhere from 50% to, I've seen a report where it had over 60% of the sales tax revenue generated within the city limits of Kingman are paid by people outside the city limits. So where that number is today, I'm not sure, but that just reports that have been done over the years.
Well, I just want to make one more point, and then I can be done. I also like that you put in the presentation that 53% of, or that we have police and fire that we also have to fund, and not everybody realizes that. So after you take that chunk out for police and fire, which thank you very much for keeping us safe and having those services, that's a huge chunk of our budget. So we're not left with much more to dedicate to our roads year over year. So, and then I do have another question. It just came to me. So let's talk about the half streets, the half roads. Will we be able to make those roads whole at some point if we move forward with this?
So I'm going to explain a program that so anybody that currently lives on a road that isn't asphalt, this program would give us the ability to participate with those homeowners on improvements in what is known as a street improvement district, where the city could, if we had the money, could participate at a certain percentage, but it does not forgive homeowners that have bought homes on unimproved, I don't want to say unimproved, non-asphalt roads would have to contribute just out of fairness because what they paid for their homes is going to be less than what people paid for their homes on a paved street. So there could be some contribution, a percentage that the city agreed to participate with, done all over the place. Totally think that that's absolutely something that we should do. If we can afford to do it, we should do that. But it will not just straight up pave unimproved streets or dirt or gravel streets.
Councilor Semley, is that it? We're good? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Tina and Jack and actually Manager Foggin and all staff, thanks for all this. Couple different questions and comments. On your charts where it's the funding for the street repair and it says, you know, in the green highlighted sales tax increase of 0.52. Now, I think that number is actually a little bit lower than what you came to us at the planning session.
That's correct. That's because of the in-house work that Councilman Walker asked us to research.
So we appreciate that. Can you remind us again, just for so the public knows and understands all the TPT, the sales tax, and how that all works? The city collects right now 2.5%, but the total is what? Is it 8.1 or is it 8.2? I've seen on receipts even from stores, I see a variation.
So it depends on what you're purchasing, but overall, if you're going to Walmart or Home Depot, you're paying 8.1%.
Okay.
If you're going to a restaurant, it's 9.1%.
Correct.
Okay. And that's not on food.
And
if you
that's
go to
not on
Walmart.
food. Thank you.
Right.
Yes,
No,
that's
there's
not
sales
no
tax on
food sales tax.
Correct.
Yes.
So obviously the city's 2.5, that means the county is 5.6.
The state is 5.6.
Oh,
The
state,
county
yes.
doesn't have any.
Yes, right, the state. Okay. So then, secondly, once again, that 0.52 is a nice number to see that it's gone down. So if we, for example, were to round that up, because I know Councilor Samley mentioned it in our planning session, when we discussed all this, maybe going up to 0.6, for example. That would give us some extra funding. Well, for one thing, this only covers through year 7, if we were told right, correct? I mean,
No, it covers us.
well, it covers the 10 years, but I mean, we start having to put a lot more monies into the program.
Nope.
This will cover all of it. Okay. But it'll give us some freedom to do some other stuff, maybe roads that don't have asphalt yet.
Yeah, so in the out years on this particular chart, so that's that year 8, year 9, and year 10, we would collect, or we would be able to dedicate about $7 million towards the streets, but the program's only requiring about $4 million.
Okay.
So there would be some excess in those out years. And I think that's what Mr. Foggin was alluding to.
And it was brought up that as a history of previous city councils, when something like this has been asked for, they've been pretty faithful to sticking and keeping those funds allocated to that.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. There was one more thing I was going to mention, but anyway, I will remember it here in a second.
How about I take a moment while you remember?
Okay, Councilor Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, guys, thank you so much for everything you're doing. One of the things that I really want to stress at this very moment while we're having this conversation, we have a few people, and I'm going to go Dina on everybody right now. We have a few people running for council who really want to tell people that we're looking at 5%. We're looking at like full-on percentage points for this tax increase. We're not. And that needs to be corrected, and that needs to be something that citizens look at and understand. That what we're sitting at right now, how we're sitting here and having this conversation, we're not playing with those numbers. We're talking at a level of numbers that we're willing to talk about, which means we're asking the citizens to talk about it. And I'm scared. I'm really nervous that we have council members, or not council, future potential council members who are having this conversation and they're flat confused. And maybe that's not politically correct. And frankly, I'm sorry, I'm not in the council chamber. You can see my face right now because all y'all know me. But anyway, they got to figure this out. They got to understand. And we got to start talking to our citizens correctly. This isn't how it's going to work. We're looking at a 0.5 something, a 0.6 something.
that's really honestly going to benefit the city of Kingman. And I believe firmly, I am sitting next to, not at this moment, but I'm sitting with a group of people that I firmly trust, that they honestly only want to do the best for the city of Kingman, period. They have no secret agendas. They have no things they want to have created. They simply want the city of Kingman to be better, and they honestly and truly firmly want our streets to be better. And I believe in the city staff that's sitting in front of us, that I believe that that's what's going to happen. So whether we vote 0.5, 0.6, first off, potential city council people, get your facts right if you're going to run and you're going to try to talk about it. And on the other side of it, city council people, I appreciate you and I stand strong with you. And I believe this is an amazing jump and a solid stand for all of us to be on. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Nelson. I remembered what I wanted to ask. Actually, Manager Fogg, and I want to include you in this too. Can you remind us of the citizen surveys and the importance of what they requested as far as street? Because that comes into play with all this.
Yeah, well, it's part of what we.
And why we're going down
right.
this route.
No, it's exactly right. When we do the the annual survey of citizens, we purposely ask some direct questions that affect the city of Kingman. We have that, we get a page worth of questions that aren't part of the national survey. And one of those questions we, of course, ask is about pavement preservation and maintaining our roads and how important it is. And we had, I would say it's almost 100%, 90% of the people that did participate in our randomly selected citizen survey, 90% of those people said that the city needs to concentrate on doing road maintenance and repair, which is, you know, anything north of 75% is a really strong score. 90% on a randomly selected survey is pretty much 100% of the citizens saying that this should be a priority for the city. And so we've used that information, shared it with the council in our annual retreat, and the council, when we started developing the budget and as we presented it, the council has said we've got to do something for streets. And so this is really the culmination of all of that. Citizen input, council looking at that, giving us their priorities, and here we sit talking about having a vote of the people for a sales tax increase.
And obviously, none of us want increased taxes. No one wants to pay more out of their pocket. But on the same token, too, when a large number of our citizens are willing to put a tax into effect to improve the roads, to help pay for this, then obviously as a council we have to listen. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think you have. Let's just put that out there. I think the council has been listening for quite some time. And to be honest with you, this problem didn't start 5 years ago. It didn't start 10 years ago. It's frankly been a can that the city's been kicking down the road for well over 25, 30 years, that our streets have just simply not been funded to the standard that they need. And had the council 30 years ago looked at this and said, you know what, we need to have a tax structure that makes sure that streets are being repaired and maintained and improved, the tax rate would have been a little bit higher than it was back in the day, and we would have a better PCI. Our PCI is really bad, and it's headed in the wrong direction and has been for quite some time. I think, Jack, the thing that, if you take away anything from the slides that you've been shown tonight, that pie chart with all the blue in it, the thing that we've been saying is that the cost to really repair roads can be $30, $50 a square yard, and maintenance is $5. And you can see you can see the difference in the cost, $80 million in the blue section of that pie chart.
Okay, thank you, Manager Froggen.
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Hamley.
I just want to just make a comment, and then I want to ask Tina to clarify the big ticket option versus a single ticket. I just need that scenario again. But I think it's time that we do right by our citizens. I mean, our residents deserve to have the street in front of their house looking as nice as the other streets in this town that are heavily trafficked. And it improves property values, and they say they want it, so it's a half a penny. I mean, when you put it into perspective, it really is a small sacrifice to give our city the beauty that it needs in our streets that have been so dilapidated for so long. So I just think it's time to do right by our citizens. So with that, could you run through that scenario again? So as we can decide, which way we want to go, big ticket, single ticket.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely. So it's called the big ticket option, and there's the single item and the single item portion. So two different options within the big ticket option language. And so the single item says that if an item exceeds a specified dollar amount, so we're going to use the $10,000 as the example, if an item exceeds $10,000, that entire purchase will be taxed at the lower rate. That's the single item. Single item portion is the amount up to $10,000 will be charged at the higher rate. The amount past $10,000 will be charged at the lower rate.
So, sorry. can I
No,
jump
go
in
ahead,
here?
of course.
To kind of clarify even further, I think your recommendation is at the 10,000, right? Because you have a figure for us that it needs to go up to 0.56. And that's based on calculating how?
Under the single item portion,
Under the single
using
item.
a $10,000
Okay.
specified dollar amount and using 2.5% as the tax rate, that's the lower tax rate.
So to make the compromise with big ticket sellers like car dealers, if we think that's necessary, and there are none here tonight, but to make that happen, everybody else has to pay more. So I think that's why you said it's most fair to tax everybody the same rate, because what we're looking at is because we have a target dollar figure that we have to hit. So if we make it less to buy, say, a car, everybody else has to pay more on their daily goods of the 0.56 rate in order to hit that overall total. So that's something to think, I think you're right, the most fair is everybody pays the same, but more importantly, we just want this to pass so that our streets get fixed. So it's a question of, will those big ticket sellers fight this initiative to fix the roads and not want to invest in our city? It's kind of an interesting thing.
So, Vice Mayor,
Yes.
Tina, what would the figures be if we didn't go to 10,000 and we went to 15,000?
So I didn't consider
I
that
know you
option,
didn't,
but
and-
I can
and I'm
certainly
not-
quickly calculate something. So it would be 0.55 is probably what we could get away with on that.
Okay.
It would be very, very small difference if we
Okay.
increased it.
Okay.
It's there's a revenue loss, but it's not a huge revenue loss that we're estimating. So the difference in rate isn't super impactful.
Well, and I recall when this was up for discussion and the referendum came to pass, it was because of not even considering or giving any kind of concession to those big ticket items. So I really feel that it's necessary to do some kind of compromise this go round, because that was the big discussion as to why the referendum happened the way that it did. So that being said, I definitely want to consider that and give it, extreme consideration in whatever we pass. So, because they will be affected the most. We definitely want to keep business in town. We don't want to give anybody any other reason to leave town and give another city sales tax revenue.
And that's the whole point of the big ticket option. It's recruitment and retention.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions as far as this item? Yes, Councilor Saley.
My final comments before we move forward. You know, I've sat on this council for 6 years. I've seen a lot of different people come and go. The council members, all intelligent, everyone wanted to fix the streets. No one could figure out how to do that without raising taxes to have the funding there. There is a funding source. It's not enough. And, you know, really all we're talking about is letting the voters decide. It's the number one thing I hear is fix our streets. And so they get to decide if they believe Kingman's worth investing in, if they believe their streets are worth fixing, they'll pay the half cent, they'll vote yes. If they vote no, the streets won't get fixed and they won't have reason to complain anymore because we are giving the citizens a choice. So my hope, because this is my home, I've lived here my entire life, my hope is that people will believe in Kingman enough to invest in it and to make it a better place to live. So that's all I have.
Thank you. So, how do we want to tailor this, council? That's we're sort of going different directions here, and we need to put it back to what we want. On the one hand, it was brought up that if we do a big ticket item, then we're asking everybody else to help pay for the savings on that sales tax. On the one hand, is that fair? It's not really, but you know, I can also see, Councilor Samley, your argument as far as, is that going to be enough to push people wanting to go shop elsewhere, especially big ticket, like an automobile, for example. And we want to get them on board too. Councilor Walker, you look like you have something to say.
Well, yeah, I think the big ticket items, the cars, the motorcycles, I think they would be our biggest hurdle if we try to, if we don't do the big ticket item.
Okay.
You know, I buy some equipment out of Phoenix because we don't have a dealer here for it. And the city of Phoenix, that's where I've watched this system work with them, and it's at the 10,000 mark is where they're at. And I mean, it's just hitting the people buying those high dollar items. I don't know if we leave it at a straight across tax, everyone pays the same. I don't know if we're really, are we going to lose enough car sales and high ticket items that we're not going to get the revenue? I mean, I can see it going both ways here. I think we need to try
Vice Mayor? Oh, sorry.
keep that in mind, because they were our biggest hurdle last time, I think, on promoting the reversal of the sales tax.
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, Mayor.
Well, having gone through that experience, I think that at this point, we know that that was a huge hurdle and it really overturned something that we know is needed. So, and I think even at that time, we were, as a council, discussing a concession for the big ticket items to come back to council because of the impact of the large sales and the sellers. I think at this point, we know that that is substantive, that they feel passionately about this, and it seems to me like we would consider it this round. I think it could help take this over the top. It's essential that we do the very best we can to tailor this so that it passes, knowing that we will get there from here if the voters will approve this. So I could certainly support the big ticket, though I I prefer for people to pay the same up to 10,000 so that it's equitable up to that point. And then have a reduction for the big ticket. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. So who wants to put this into a proposal? I mean, for example, just throwing this idea out there.
Vice Mayor,
Oh,
I apologize. I'm your pain and I'm your distant pain. I'm sorry about that.
no, you're good. Counselor Nelson, go ahead.
I honestly have to say, I'm very comfortable with having conversation with many of the different car dealers in town. The big ticket item guys in town, and they're not stupid. They're some of the smartest men and women I have dealt with in my life ever. And they understand, they appreciate. They're not out to pay for things they don't need to pay for, but they're absolutely out to support and take care of the things that we need in the city of Kingman. And honestly and truly, I believe when they're able to be faced with, or when we present to them the, hey, guys, this is what it's for, and this is where it's really honestly going. It's not going anywhere else, but it's to our streets. They're going to support us every bit as much as anyone down the street. Our big ticket people aren't stupid, and they understand, and they really, truly will support us in this. I do firmly believe.
Thank you, Counselor Nelson. So what are you thinking? Since I'm going to put you on the spot. I think we lost her.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay, Counselor Samley.
With scrutiny from Mr. Cooper. I know. I would like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 5423 specific to roads, street preservation, street maintenance at a rate of 0.56 with the big ticket single portion up to $10,000. Is that stated correctly or?
5-6.
Okay.
Was that a motion?
It was, yes, ma'am.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second on it.
Okay.
Is that the way we want to move then? Okay.
Can I just interrupt before anything gets adopted? So Carl, because we're increasing the rate that's in the ordinance, are you comfortable with that?
I actually am looking at how we noticed everything. I am, because the way we noticed the documentation, so I think we're okay with that.
Thank you.
And I just want to make specific that it is specific to roads, street preservation, maintenance. I want to make sure that's in there, Carl.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Can
All
we-
those in favor?
Mayor- Vice Mayor.
Oh, yes.
So let's, if we're being specific, repair, maintenance, and improvement.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We're good there? Clarification then? Okay. All those in favor of resolution number 5423 as just discussed, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion carries. I think one important thing is Councillor Samley did point out the fact that all we are doing is putting this on the ballot. This whole discussion and what we've had today with this resolution, it's going to be put on the ballot. So we are giving the citizens of Kingman the chance to say yay or nay on this, to participate in government and how their streets are going to be handled. I think we need to emphasize that. Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you all. Item 6, department reports. 6A, Mojave County Fairgrounds update. Manager Foggin.
Yes, thank you. This will not take very long. So this was a request from council a few weeks ago with regards to a department report. I just want to do a little clarification because I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding of what was actually happening. So the county has done some studying with the potential of moving the fairgrounds at some time, at some point. They currently have no plans for that. They're just really in the study mode of what movement of the fairgrounds could look like, may look like. So one of the properties that they've been looking at is what they refer to as the Shinnerup Road property, and that's part of that, or a big portion of it, it's BLM property that they've made a deal and have a potential of getting more property. I think they currently have around 375 acres as part of that property. What happened is they started looking at the property. They decided that they probably needed to call a timeout and figure out what was actually needed for fairground property. Was it motocross? Was it racetrack? Was it just rodeo grounds? And so what they've done is they've basically, at this point, they've invited what they've called an ad hoc committee made up of various stakeholders in the different activities that have been talked about, rodeo, tourism. So we have a couple of people that are representing us on that ad hoc committee. Josh Noble is participating from tourism. Economic development has been Sylvia Schaefer. I've met with Sam Elders a couple times, and we've talked about, what the city's looking for, that kind of thing. But they're really just trying to figure out how much property they actually need, what they could do with that property, but they've associated no design to this. For now and for a number of years, the fairgrounds will remain at its current location until there's a funding mechanism for moving the fairgrounds. And then at that point, there'd be discussion about what the county hopes or wants to do or needs to do with the current fairgrounds that they, and the property that they own. Will they need to sell that at full market value to be able to afford what they're wanting to do? We just don't know that. But that's what I know to date, as the ad hoc committee is meeting, and they'll have a report with regards to how much property they actually need and what activities over the years they need to program that property for, and ultimately what will that cost them. So happy to answer any questions, but that's about all the information I have on the fairgrounds at this time.
Manager Foggin,
Yes.
How many acres does our current fairgrounds occupy?
70, I want to say 75 approximately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Councilor Samley.
Is
Councilor Seeley.
is our official position that we do not want them to move it? Because that's
I don't know what
would affect our tax.
We don't think we have an official position. I would say that from the city's standpoint, it would not be in the best interest of the city for the fairgrounds to move. Right. That would be my professional opinion, because it's in the center of town. It's been well received. People have lived around the fairgrounds for a long, long time. It gets dusty. It's not sometimes the best neighbor, but it's often the best neighbor.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Manager Foggin? Okay. Hearing none, moving on to 6B, Water Resources Report. And I think Manager Foggin is going to deflect to Rob Owen, our public
I'm
works.
certainly not going to deflect, but it is
Not
Rob's.
deflect, but-
This is a Rob show, so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. We prepared a report for you this evening on water resources. So in the presentation tonight, we'll be going through some information that county staff presented to the Board of Supervisors last week. We'll also be updating some of our plans and projects to address our water issues going forward, and kind of wrap up with an update on legislative issues and where they stand. So this part of the report was provided by Mr. Walsh over at Development Services, and his staff was integral in putting this together. So the Wallapai Basin is roughly 1,200 square miles in area. It's comprised of 3 subbasins, Kingman Subbasin, which is where the majority of our water comes from, the Wallapai Basin, which is kind of in the middle, and then the Gregg Subbasin, which is a little bit further up north. So we'll be going through some slides in our work with the county and USGS. We've kind of, the USGS has developed a model to model the conditions of our groundwater aquifer. And you'll see a reference throughout this report on 1,200 feet below surface. So if water is considered below 1,200 feet below ground level, then that's kind of a metric that the Department of Water Resources uses to say that that's not considered an assured or adequate water supply. So back in 2013, USGS did a water budget. So the folks that we know that live within an AMA, this is a process they go through every year. They have to develop a water budget, show how much water is coming out of the aquifer, how much is going back in. So back in 2013, we had a deficit of, 5,600 acre feet a year. And when that was updated based upon the model for 2021, that went up to over 30,000 acre feet a year. So this kind of shows estimated withdrawals from the aquifer, along with estimated recharge, both natural or other. And of course, the big chunk of that change was the development of large-scale agriculture in the area, which basically did not exist before 2013. This slide talks about the number of wells in the basin. In 2012, there was and I guess the state standard on well is for like a non-exempt well. So that means a non-exempt well is a well that's over 35 gallons per minute. Exempt wells are under 35 gallons per minute, and those are considered for domestic use. So we went from one well application in 2012, and this is within the whole basin, to 242 between 2012 and 2021. I guess what is of concern is that it's the type of wells. These are some big wells. There are 16 wells capable of 3,000 gallons per minute or greater. That's bigger than anything we have in our system. Generally, our biggest wells are running between 2,300 gallons per minute and 2,500. Excuse me. So this is, again, information that county staff has put together. Currently shows about 77, and this is for both the Wallapai Basin and then specifically within the Kingman Subbasin. So it shows that there's a lot of remaining acreage that's owned that has not been developed for agriculture yet. In the Wallapai Basin, it's estimating 26,900 acre feet water demand. And in the Kingman Basin, it's a little bit over 16,000 acre feet water demand. And the way that they do that, and the Department of Water Resources also works with that, is they look at crop type and typical usage, how much water those types of plants consume at different times throughout their lifespan, and then look at the amount of acreage that's in cultivation. So this is the model results. And again, this is going to be a tool that we're going to be doing every year. So this is actually the first time that we've run this tool working with the county and USGS. So the base model showed that we had 140 years until we reached that 1,200-foot depth. The base model utilized the existing data for farms with some moderate growth, and the existing data for municipal use really without any kind of growth number put into that. So the second scenario was that updated the city of Kingman use to allow for some growth of that municipal use over time. We went with 2.5%. That's what we've got. That's what we show as far as the growth of the system in the water master plan. The issue, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that as some of our other programs to promote water conservation or water system efficiency improve, that's not going to be a direct correlation between population growth and water demand. That we'll be getting more efficient as we go, and that our customers are going to be conserving more water as we move forward. But that takes the model out to 100 years to get to that 1,200 foot depth. Scenario number 3 allows for the 10-year growth to maturity of the existing acreage. So that's the current agricultural acreage with no expansion. And that's at 130 years. And then scenario number 4, we always have to end on the most negative note, but that's the worst case scenario. That's that all of the area owned by agricultural interest is developed, excluding the mountainous terrain. And again, that there's no improvements on efficiency or conservation on the municipal use. So this is what's concerning, I guess, in general, is that, as the surface drops, most of our wells are about 1,000 to 1,100 feet. If we were to drop to 1,200 feet below surface, we'd be drilling new wells. And the well costs about $2 to $3 million per. The other issue is once you get down deeper like that, you're more likely to run into briny or water with a lower quality, which is probably going to have to require some sort of pre-treatment before it could go into a distribution system. It might be, saltier, it might have more mineral content. So we'll take a deep breath after the worst case scenario and talk about what we're doing about it. So, we're developing, implementing plans and developing new plans for development up in the Wallapai Basin. The model kind of predicts that there's a shelf kind of out around Long Mountain somewhere. And right now, water is moving freely between the Kingman subbasin and the main Wallapai Basin. At some future drawdown within the Kingman subbasin, we become an island that's not connected to the Wallapai Basin. So, the first most logical thing to do is look at developing some water sources in the Wallapai Basin to supplement what we're taking out of the Kingman subbasin. We do have wells in the Sacramento Valley Basin. Typically, our wells downtown are considered part of Sacramento Valley. And we do have a well siting study that analyzes different sites out there. We do have a couple different options. One would be out along Highway 68, and then another one would be further down I-40 within the Sacramento Valley. That's a very expensive project, or a very expensive program. It would be phased out over many years, and it would be something that we'd be implementing, you know, depending on how every year when we go run this model, how that comes back, you know, that'll be used along with whatever we're able to obtain out of the Wallapai subbasin. We have a recharge program, Hilltop Recharge Well, should be online this fall. Run into some issues with some supply chain problems. Phil's team, we've installed 10 dry wells, and we're working on the next 10. So those will be going into infiltration basins, and we'll be capturing that storm water to help recharge the aquifer. And we have a purple pipe project. Unfortunately, that's on hold at the moment because that's contingent on the downtown outfall line project, and we had some serious price escalation on that. But ultimately, that will bring reclaimed water back from the downtown plant, and we'll be able to use that for irrigation in the downtown area. Water system efficiency improvements. Most of these are covered under that last item, which is our non-revenue water program. You know, we've identified that a source of our water loss is through old meters. And so those are being replaced, and we'll be moving towards, you know, in the interim, we'll be doing drive-by meters that don't require the meter reader to actually physically go to every meter. They'll be able to drive down the block and pick up all the reads. Ultimately, we've got some money in the budget this year to start installing some of the infrastructure for the transmission equipment to where those meters will be able to transmit those reads, you know, to a repeater, to antennas and repeaters, which will get transmitted downtown. Typically, those meters read every 15 minutes, so we'll be able to catch errors or leaks a lot sooner. We'll be able to set up flags within the billing system so that we can reach out to customers when they're having, you know, when they used a lot of water overnight, or when they're having other types of issues with high water use. We do SCADA upgrades. That's the communication system that monitors the water system and lets us control all that remotely.
Rob, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, sir.
How many of those meters, the new technology meters, do we have? Do we have some in place already?
Yes, sir. I think we got about 2,000 in
Okay.
place right now. We've got, we've put in 2 grant applications to fund some more with the Bureau of Reclamation through their Water Smart grant program. So we'll be waiting to hear on those. This fall, we'll find out whether those were approved or not.
Most new homes that are being built and their water meter hookup, are they putting the new meter in?
A lot of them. Again, I hate to keep saying the same phrase, but water meters are tough to get right now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks.
So the non-revenue water program's kind of a multi-phase. Initially, we did a pilot program with Department of Water Resources. We were chosen for that. Went through this annual water balance or annual water audit based upon some industry standard guidelines. So we've been doing that every year since 2016, which is giving us good information to help identify, you know, where to prioritize improvements for efficiency in the system. And that's pretty much what pointed us to moving forward on the meter replacements first. We are in phase 2 and 3 of that program right now. Most of the heavy lifting for this phase is being conducted by utility billing. And Michelle and her team going through, they've supplied our consultant with every meter read for like an 18-month period, and going through there and looking for any anomalies, if there's anything built into the system that is not capturing water or not capturing water use accurately. And so that's been, that'll provide some good information on that front. A lot of this process is about better information to allow us to be the most efficient. These are some of the recommendations that we've had out of the non-revenue water program so far. We're in that level 2 validation of billing information in the moment. Some things we'll do, we've increased a lot of our meter testing, and that's on both sides, customer side plus our supply side, because if our numbers of what we're taking out of the ground isn't accurate, then that's going to reflect throughout this whole analysis. So those are some of those recommendations. So the other thing we're working on is water plans and policies. So we've adopted this one water framework. I've got these cool stickers if anybody wants them for their water jugs. But we've, and again, the one water framework is that, we're looking at, what we take out of the ground, wherever that might be from, plus stormwater capture and recharge, our reclaimed water from the treatment plants. We're looking at all those factors. We established the Water Sustainability Task Force. We have quarterly meetings with, it's mostly the county development services staff. We've got we got space for a couple public members on there. That's been a good way for us to communicate with the county, make sure we're all on the same page. We're able to coordinate projects and do some resource sharing on some of those projects. And I'll just take you through a few of these. We participated in the Growing Water Smart workshop that was put on by the Babbitt Center and the Sonoran Institute. That was a good, I thought that was a good exercise. We built a team. The mayor was actually participated in that a little bit, but was unable to participate fully, but we appreciated the input we got from her. But we formed a team, and it was the city engineer, myself, it was community development, economic development, and so everybody kind of went through this process together, and it's all about linking water use with land use and making sure that your whole staff is on board with the concepts and the goals of where you're trying to get. This information's from the Water Conservation Plan. It shows that we've got, our ratepayers are pretty efficient. Right now, the gallons per capita per day for residential within our system is at 89. And you'll see Phoenix residential rate's quite a bit higher. Tucson's a little bit lower. And then these are some observations out of the Water Conservation Plan. Again, it shows that we have a pretty good grip on our gallons per capita per day consumption. Parks and schools use a lot, but it doesn't look like they're over irrigating. Industrial commercial sector, not many large water using facilities, and that's something we were kind of able to reiterate with that Growing Water Smart workshop, is that we're not out trying to incentivize big water users to come here for economic development purposes. And then this would be the program components for our water conservation program. So we would have we have recommendations on the city side as far as us running the most efficient system that we can. We'd have education, outreach to schools. We used to do a lot more of this before the pandemic. We'd be able to provide technical assistance, whether that's audits to residential or commercial users on the way for them to have the most efficient irrigation system or whatever it may be. Code requirements are always a possibility under that kind of program. and then justifying, financial incentives to be established for rebates and such on appliances or other, taking out turf. Legislative efforts, and I would ask any of you to please jump in and correct if I did not summarize these correctly. I know many of you have been involved in this. But the Mojave County West Basin Water Users Study Committee was formed in 2019. The Governor's Water Innovation and Augmentation, I'm sure I said that wrong, committee was formed in 2019. Department of Water Resources provided, we're provided with $1,000 for the initial study that's referred to as the matrix study. We executed the IGA with Mojave County and USGS for development for completion of the detailed study and development of the model of the basin. Those initial findings were presented to council and the board in 2020. The Rural Groundwater Working Group, established in 22, 3 years in a row. Representative Cobb has introduced a bill to authorize rural management areas. Back in June, County Supervisor, some county staff, and myself met with Speaker Bowers to discuss groundwater issues. The state budget was passed on June 22nd. It includes $1 billion in funding for water resilience. I think that still has to be figured out exactly what that means or what that was intended for. And then the ModFlow model results that you just saw were presented to the to this group. And this is just a little information I found, kind of talks about the concept of the rural management area. It would be a new category to allow, kind of on a voluntary basis, counties to opt in, and it could be applied to one basin or a portion of one basin or one sub-basin, but it'd be a way to kind of manage and bring those stakeholders together to kind of work on these types of issues. And I've also heard some discussion about the possibility of amending the irrigation non-expansion area to maybe more directly address the types of issues that we're facing. So with that, I would defer to Manager Foggin if I forgot anything or.
There's a lot of information, so a lot to take in. I think really, if we were to just bring this down into summary, it is that we are actively involved in trying to get some legislation in place with our county partner. We've had made some great progress this year. We actually thought we were going to get some legislation that we keep being promised through different efforts, most of which is coming from Representative Cobb and the work that she's done. The mayor has done just a lion's share of meetings with the state and with the stakeholder groups. But if I was going to tell you anything, it would be that the city is doing its part to reduce and use water as smart as we possibly can, and we have a plan in place in which to expand our resource usage of water so that we're not reliant or dependent on whether there's legislation or not. That's really the bottom line, is that we see what's happening. We need help from the state legislature. Currently, there's no barrier to entry for people that are wanting to do huge, large corporate farming in our county and in our basin, and that's the legislative help that we need. but we also need to be prepared to help ourselves. And we've been doing that, recharge, trying to make sure that we're not wasting water underground with leaks and meters that aren't working properly. All of that stuff adds up. And we had a reporter, a TV reporter, that did a feature a little while ago that she did a really great job on the feature, and she asked me a question, which is, well, the city's doing all this work, why are you doing that when others can draw the water out and you have no control? And my response was that we need to do our part and be the example as how to use water, and I think that's the right thing to do. And the city has spent millions of dollars on water conservation and recharge, and we're not going to stop there. We obviously need to have diversified source of water, and we're going to be working on that, continue to work on it. As Rob said, this number of studies have been done, and we have property that position us well into the future for having water from now until the city doesn't exist. But there's still, the wish to not have to spend millions of dollars on doing that, and we're trying to do our part to protect that water and use it the way it should be used. So,
Any questions for Rob from council?
I do.
Yes, Councilor Walker.
Rob, how quick can we get the educational stuff out, like PSAs on the radio, paper? I mean, is there anything we can be doing as a city quicker? I mean, I haven't noticed anything.
Well, like I said, we were doing a lot more of that when we were doing more special events or more going out into the schools, but we definitely are prioritizing that. There's a couple, there's statewide organization referred to as WET, and they have kind of a lot of that information that's kind of canned. But we definitely look at getting into that, and then even copying maybe some materials from other places that we can
I think
utilize.
it's crucial we get it out as quick as we can. I've had a few calls on this myself, people asking, what are we doing as a city? Are we asking people to cut back on landscaping, washing their cars at home, to cut back on that versus using car washes? I mean, I've heard all kinds of ideas, and, that's just my first part of it was, what can we do to get this out there to get our residents in line with what we need to do to conserve? And my number two question is, Vaughn Ranch, we have that, there's a well there now?
Yes, sir.
But it's not connected to our system?
No, it's just it's a smaller well.
Okay,
Yes.
I wasn't sure how big the well was. I didn't think it was connected to the system. I just knew that was a future water source for us, but it looks like it's not going to do us any good with
Well,
all the
I
wells.
think that's going to be an area where we're going to be doing some exploration for wells.
So that site
That's
could be good
close.
for
I
us.
think we'll just need to make that get that final determination that that's where we want to go. But I think that generally that's in the area. That's right around that Long Mountain area, and that's our prime target.
Okay. I was just wondering about that, because I knew the city had that property, but I wasn't sure how big the well was, and I was pretty sure it wasn't connected to the system, and how many miles are we from tying it into the system?
And those are all things that be covered in that scope as we're developing that well site development plan out there.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, or
Vice Mayor?
Yep.
Yes, Mayor.
I think it's also important when we are educating the public to let them know how successful they have been and the city has been in conserving water to date. And in particular, Rob and Manager Fagan, I think that there's some numbers that the city has that just illustrate how well we have done, and we need to build on that success and certainly avoid, we need to build on that success and also inform them of the great efforts that we've been making to ensure that we have this water supply, because just the numbers can be frightening if you just think, oh, wow, this is, what do we have to do? Well, we've done a lot, as you've pointed out, and we need to inform them of that. And then the other question I have to Manager Foggin is, with the funding that has been allocated at the state and or federal levels, do we see that we are going to be able to access some of the grant funding and whatnot that is out there to help us in our water conservation, water, or with the wells or with any other type of our water projects?
Thank you, Mayor. Good question. We are monitoring grant opportunities. We're obviously the state grant opportunities are what they're ultimately going to do with that allocated money. As Rob said, they've not determined yet. As far as federal dollars are concerned, we have been looking at those. Rob had mentioned that some of these federal dollars are for really designed to help water loss. We've applied for several grants that would definitely put us ahead as far as the meters are concerned and the ability to monitor any kind of leaks moving forward. I'll say just modernized, a better modernized system. So there are grants. We have submitted those, and we're just waiting. I think they're not going to be announced until this fall. One other thing.
Yes, Manager Foggin.
I'm reminded of the ADWR. We'll be having a public process for the Wallapai Basin for an INA, and we need as many people as we can get to be ready to give feedback, to give public comment on the INA, and that really is when they go through that process, they're looking for a lot of support, or if there's no support for an INA. And so that will give the director of ADWR enough ammunition or enough feedback to move forward with an INA and to implement a process to have the INA. So that's something that the director of that State Department actually has the ability to do, has the authority to do if he or she gets enough public feedback. So more to come on that.
Could you qualify what INA is, or IMA?
INA, Rob, what's the
It's
acronym?
excuse me, it's an irrigation non-expansion area.
Okay.
So it basically, my understanding of it is it freezes that agricultural withdrawal at that level. And so, overall it has to be, you can't farm anything new until somebody else is done farming. And then, so it sets a cap at how much agricultural water use can occur.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, Mayor.
I really, I've mentioned several times that this INA is really critical, in my opinion, to resolving the long-term water issue for the Wallapai Basin. And I'm not sure of this, but we need to confirm this, Rob. But I think that those farmers that the agricultural interests that are already there are grandfathered in, of course. And there's also some conditions about investment, how much they've invested or prepared to irrigate. So there are some items we need to clarify and make sure that we understand as we do give public support to the INA. But I think it's very important for the council to take a position and to advocate strongly for the INA, because those that are already here are protected, but the full out expansion, which was the worst case scenario that Rob showed, would be avoided. So this is a really, really critical and very hopeful, I think, public process that is coming forward. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, and so you're absolutely correct in that as soon as we have more information with regards to how this works at the state level, we will definitely get it out. Again, they're not looking for just, obviously, my opinion or the council's opinion. It's, can we get a lot of community members out in support of an INA? And if we can show that the community stands behind it, the director of that, I believe his name's Tom, will have the ammunition that he needs to move forward with the INA. And so that's been kind of in the making, and we've been just waiting for the details. And so as soon as the details are available, we will be promoting it like crazy. So.
Thank you, Manager Fagan. I know,
Thank you.
Mayor Miles, I know you've attended a number of committees and through Zoom, you've been able to, as far as this water issue. And I know and I think Mayor has too, even to the point of candidates that are running for state office to bring to their knowledge that we have a water problem up here. And I think that's, the more we can do to share this knowledge with people, I think is really important. So, Rob, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All the reports and your staff, and Manager Fagan, and of course, once again, all of city staff that has had input on this. Thank you. Moving on to item 7 on our agenda, announcements by mayor, council members, and city manager. Manager Fagan, we'll start with you.
I currently have no announcements tonight, Mayor, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Walker.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Sally.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Councilor Saley. Okay. Councilor Nelson.
Not tonight, but thank you.
I have nothing for this body tonight. Mayor Miles.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Well, once again, thanks to all that have been here tonight. Item 8, council request for future reports and updates. Do we have anything? Councilor Saley.
So I'm sure I can anticipate what the answer to this is, but in the spirit of transparency, I'd like to see if Chief Cooper could respond to the question that was posed during call to the public tonight in regards to what the city's position is on investigating and prosecuting people who are seeking and obtaining abortions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, hearing
Vice
none.
Mayor?
Yes,
Vice
Mayor
Mayor?
Miles.
I'm interested, since the legislature has passed some legislation regarding short-term rentals, and Manager Fagan, I know we've communicated on this, but I think it would be of interest to inform the council about that legislation, and perhaps you want to do that as part of the legislative report, but I specifically think that that is something that we'll be wanting to act on.
Preview for next council meeting, we have a legislative update for the 2022 legislature from Tom Dorn.
Okay.
So stay tuned for that.
Sounds like it's
Excellent.
coming,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Okay. Hearing no other request, do we need a motion or we just adjourn? We adjourn this meeting. Once again, thanks everybody for being here in council chambers.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.